Hi everyone, welcome back to our Supporting Struggling Readers series. Last session, we talked about phonological awareness and the sounds that we hear in words and letters. This week, we are going to talk about the sounds and the letter representations that go with those sounds. I'm Natalie.
I'm Kim.
Okay, let's get started. So we're going to review a couple of key vocabulary that's going to be very important as we move forward and as you begin to work with either your child or your students. The first is a phoneme, and a phoneme is a unit of sound. And as Kim mentioned last week, when we think of the word phoneme, we think of the word phone. And when we're speaking on a phone, we only hear the sounds. So we're not considering the letters that we see on paper or in books. We're only thinking of the sound. So as an example, this is not a phoneme. This is a letter. And so when we have a phoneme, this letter makes lots of different sounds. So this has many phonemes. The alternative to a phoneme is a grapheme, which is our letter representation. And so when you think of a grapheme, you think of a symbol or of a graph, so a written form. So this is our grapheme, and all of these sounds that this grapheme makes are our phonemes. For instance, with the grapheme O, we have the sounds A for octopus, O for open, for love, oo for two, and then we have a very uncommon sound that we don't really hear many educators speak about. It's called a schwa, and it's when a sound is unaccented. So we have as in gallop. So this grapheme, the letter O, has 5 phonemes associated with it. And it's really important to know the difference because when we're starting to read words, we need to know that letters can represent more than one sound and that more than one grapheme can represent a sound. For example, EW is 2 graphemes, but this makes one sound, ooh. The next terminology that we're just going to review that we talked about last week is phonological awareness. So that is the ability to manipulate oral language. So that's word counting, rhymes, syllables. We also have phonemic awareness, which is the ability to manipulate individual sounds. So that was when we were doing our examples of our deletions, our additions, and our sound manipulation. So when we were saying cat, what is the first sound you hear? K. That is a phonemic awareness activity. When we were talking about syllables and word counting, we were talking about phonological awareness. Kim is going to move next into an example for us of why we need to talk about the representation of letters and sounds.
So I'm going to give you a little example to try and illustrate the difference between decoding and comprehension. So reading actually has many different components. So we're going to focus on decoding. So I'm using this example to illustrate what decoding actually means. So I lived in Mexico for a number of years and I learned some Spanish. And Spanish is actually an incredibly easy language to decode. Unlike English, the English language, each letter makes one sound, or each grapheme has one phoneme. So knowing that in Spanish, the letters make the same sound as they do in the English language, except for the letter E. The letter E says the sound A. So if you were to decode this, what would it say? I'm going to give you a moment at home.
Say it out loud. We can hear you.
So knowing that each grapheme or each letter makes the same sound as it does in English, if you were to decode this, it would say yo puedo leer. Yo puedo leer. Now, if I asked you, I would say great decoding. You decoded each letter, you know its sound correlation, and you were able to decode this sentence. The next question is, what does it mean? And unless you have familiarity with the Spanish language, most people probably aren't 100% sure what yo puedo leer actually means. And it means I can read. So everyone was probably, hopefully, successful at decoding this, but the comprehension piece, which was the meaning behind it, relied on your background knowledge of the vocabulary words in the Spanish language.
If we asked you this question another 5 times and you decoded it, and we said, what does it mean? And you kept reading it over and over again, would you understand after reading it many times? What if we put a little picture up here of a book? Would that help you understand what this means? No. What if we told you just to skip this word? Would that help you understand what it means? No. So those are some of the strategies that we often see in schools for learning how to read. And when we use an example like this, we can see really clearly how those strategies aren't helping us, because you were easily able to decode this, but those strategies didn't help you understand what you were reading.
And like Natalie said, if there was a picture of a book, if the child's strategy and only strategy is to look at the picture, they may say, I have a book. And that would completely be a different meaning of the sentence. Now, I have another example. This is a Nordic language. So this is a language system that I believe most people are probably unfamiliar with, and it is a sentence. So we're going to have to get a little creative here. Using the Nordic symbols, I have written a sentence that when matched with the English language letter, it actually has a meaning to it. So what I would like everyone to do in the next 10 to 15 seconds is to please decode this and tell me what it says.
Just read it. Come on, guys.
Just decode it.
Just read. Tell me what it means. It's so obvious.
We practice this. We practice this letter, and we practice this letter here. We practice actually all of these letters.
You know what they all mean.
So why isn't anyone decoding it? So the reason we have a lot of difficulty decoding this is because we haven't practiced with you, nor are you familiar with, the sound symbol correlation between each of these symbols. Now, this symbol here actually is the letter R. So that one might be familiar to you because it looks like a familiar letter that you've practiced and that you've seen frequently. Now, most people probably don't know what this symbol, nor this symbol, nor this symbol is. So no one is able to decode this, nor are you able to comprehend this. Now, if I gave you a letter symbol chart, you might be able to match the symbols to the letters. And what it says is reading is not easy. Reading is not easy. And the purpose of this exercise is to illustrate how difficult it is for children to memorize and know what each symbol, letter, and sound correlation. And so decoding has to be practiced and rehearsed frequently in order for children to be able to successfully decode. Another point that I want to illustrate before we put that away is often what happens is we see children who have difficulty decoding not be able to move beyond a certain level at school. So if you have a child who is struggling at level 1 and can't read a certain book, often what we do is we give them another level 1 book, and we encourage them, we tell them to keep looking at the pictures, keep guessing the word. We've practiced this before over and over and over again. So we keep giving them a level 1 book over and over. And what ends up happening is that child becomes very discouraged because they weren't able to read the first level 1. So if I were to use this same Nordic language system and I gave you multiple sentences over and over and over and over again, you probably wouldn't be any more successful with your 20th try as you would be with your first try, because what you haven't done is learned the sound symbol correlation in order to decode this. So giving you multiple copies and multiple sentences is not going to actually help your decoding abilities.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about one of our most useful strategies that you can use in your classroom or at home with your children to help them learn to read. So we are going to today talk about code packs. If you're unfamiliar with this word, it is a really popular strategy and tool for teaching children the sound letter relationship. And so what it looks like, it is a bunch of recipe cards or cue cards. I have mine colored, as you can see here, in many different colors. You can use plain colors or you can use colored. It doesn't make a difference. I do have mine color coded where I have my vowels on one color, my consonants on another, and then some of my two grapheme sounds together. But you can also just use all white. So don't feel like you need to have the different colors. It can help students recognize vowels and consonants in words, especially when we start using this to build words, which we will talk about in our next session. But for now, feel free to use any pack of codes. At the end of this session, you should have received, or you will receive, a list of the graphemes and phonemes for the English language that you will be able to use to build our code pack. So your goal when we meet for our question and answer in a couple days is to have created a code pack so that you can ask any questions about the code pack to us and we can go through it with you in a little bit more detail. So we're going to ask you to complete your own code pack, and we're going to go through the process of showing you how to create your code pack. So when you are creating your code pack, you are going to, on the front of your cue card, you are going to write the grapheme, which is the printed symbol for the letter. So we call them letters. Terminology-wise, it's a grapheme. On the back, you are going to have a list of phonemes. You can see them on here a little bit. They're muted out because I have them in pencil. The phonemes are always represented with slashes on them. So this is the grapheme with no slashes beside it. This is the phoneme. And the reason we do this is so that we know that we're talking about a sound and not a letter. So on the front, you are going to write your grapheme. So you are going to do them for all the vowels. So I have O, A, E, I, U, Y. You'll have two cards for Y because Y is a consonant and a vowel. And then you will do this for all of the consonants in the alphabet. Remember, a vowel and then consonants are A, E, I, O, U, and Y. And then consonants are all the remainder of the letters in the alphabet. And so on the front, you're going to write your alphabet, right from A all the way to Z on the front of your cue cards. You're going to write them in lowercase letters. The reason we do this is because most of the words we read have lowercase letters. We are still going to teach our children and students how to write uppercase and lowercase letters, but when we are working them with our code packs, we're writing the lowercase letters. And so also on the back, you are going to write a keyword. When we give you our document with the phonemes and graphemes, we're going to give you a keyword. The keyword is chosen because the word has the sound most often at the beginning and it represents the sound clearly. Some letters get confused when they're beside certain letters and their sounds don't come out as clear. Last week we did an example with pan, and it's a perfect example because pan technically has the short A sound, which is ah, but when it gets beside that N, it kind of puts a little twang to it. So we don't say pan, we say pan. And so that's really important to note that when we use our keywords, we need to make sure that our keywords, we hear the sound very clearly. So as an example, with our O, we have our short O vowel sound, which says aw, as in octopus. We have our short I vowel sound, which says I, as in itchy. We have our short A sound, which says ah, as in apple. Our short E sound that says as in edge. Our short U sound that says as in umbrella or up. I'm not going to go through the whole alphabet with you. Don't worry. That's not what we're doing. But I did want to give you an example of the sounds. So those are our short vowel sounds, which are the most common vowel sound in words when we're reading. So those go at the top of our list. And then we create the other sounds that our vowels make and our letters. Because remember that some graphemes, some letters can make more than one sound. So you are going to create your code pack using those letters. And then you are going to start to work with your children with the letters. One important note that I want to make when we're talking about sounds and letters is that we need to be really clear when we're talking about sounds and how they sound. Often when perhaps as parents we do it, or teachers, educators, or others in the community, we add on an extra sound to some of the letters. So for example, when a lot of teachers or parents try to teach the sound B, we might say B. Unfortunately, B is not the sound. The sound is B. So we added an extra sound at the end. It happens a lot with T, so we'll say T, or we'll say D, or P. And while that sounds like it's the right way to pronounce those letters, it's actually not. The right way would be T, D, P, B. So we're only isolating the sound itself and we're not adding that additional sound at the end. The reason why this is very important is because when we have children that are struggling to learn to read and they're trying to spell out a word, I'm going to use the word bat as an example. If they're trying to write out and spell the word bat and they hear in their head, buh, what they're going to do when we say, can you isolate those sounds or segment them? They're going to go, So they may end up with 5 different sounds because they think the B and the T have an sound at the end. So we want to be really clear that the B does not have an sound and the T does not have an sound. It's B, T. Okay. Got it, everyone? Good. So that's your code pack. You're going to create it. You're going to use your cue cards. You're going to start with the letters of the alphabet. Once you get more beyond that, you can start to add some of your other letters that we call, I'm going to find an example here for you. They're called digraphs. So this is a digraph, 2 letters that represent one sound. And there's CK, SH, TH, CH. Those are common examples. There's many more. And once you get to more advanced skills, you can start introducing those on your code packs as well. But we're going to ask you for our question and answer to create your code pack using the vowels and consonants in the alphabet. Then what we move on from once we have created our code packs is that we start to implement our code pack with our children or students. And Kim and I are going to do a demonstration of how that works. But the key points are that you are going to show the grapheme card. So you're going to show the card in your code pack. The student or child is going to say the grapheme. They're going to say the phoneme, the sound. They're going to use the keyword, and then they're going to draw the letter in the air. They could draw it on a whiteboard for a multi-sensory effect. They can draw it on, this is a wavy board. I think this is a material you can get at Home Depot. It's kind of like those fluorescent lighting covers. I've just wrapped tape around it. It's really nice because it's multi-sensory, so they can draw on here. You could use a sand table. They could draw on sand. But we want to have them associating the letter with the sound, and we want them to be writing it at the same time, especially key for our early learners. So we're going to do an example of what this would look like. Kim is going to be the parent or teacher, and I'm going to be the student. And it's really important that we follow this process until they have mastered it. And sometimes it seems like this is like you're going over it a lot, but we need that automatic. Like in session 1, we talked about 2 seconds. So we need the students and the children to be able to recognize the grapheme and the sound associated with it automatically.
Well, and another point, and this is for educators as well as parents, it's very important when we work on the code packs not to expect a new learner new to the code pack to know all the letters. And we don't want to overwhelm the students with too many letters. So we would typically introduce one, maybe two letter sounds at a time. So this demonstration is with the assumption that Natalie has practiced for quite a period of time now her code pack. So this would not be something that we would necessarily see a child do right at the very, very beginning of the code pack, but something that we have practiced.
And you're usually working with one sound at a time until it's mastered. So if this is your child's first experience with this, you're showing one card and you're doing it until it's automatic, and then you're introducing the next one. It's really great to start with your vowel sounds and then to move on to some of your more common consonants. T, P, M, N, B, D, and then moving on to some of the more complicated consonants.
Okay, so Natalie, are you ready?
Ready.
We're going to practice some of the phonemes that we have practiced together. So here we go. We're going to start with
I, itchy.
Very good.
O, octopus. If I knew another sound for O, I may also say this at this point. So I may say O, open. So they may not know both sounds, and that's completely fine. But you want to be sure that if they know more than one sound, that they say it when you're going through the code pack.
And remember, they're only saying the sounds that have been explicitly taught to them.
Apple. Edge. Up. Unicorn. Yo-yo.
Great job, Natalie. I'm going to put those ones aside, and we're going to work on some of our blue cards. We won't go through all of them, as there are quite a few of them. Here we go.
Lamp. Hot. Man.
All right. And so now, because Natalie has mastered most of her vowels and consonants, we're going to practice some of the digraphs. So I'm going to get out my turquoise cards for digraphs.
So this one I could say CH, and as I'm saying the sounds, I'm writing the letters. CH, chin. TH, thumb. This. Did you notice what I did there? So this digraph, so this letter combination makes two different sounds. One is an unvoiced sound, which means we don't use our vocal cords. The second one is a voice sound, so we turn on our voice. And there are several letters that do this in the alphabet, and often we'll see that children have difficulty with this, and really it's a matter of turning on their voice. So when you saw me do this, I'll do it again. So TH unvoiced, or sometimes with children I'll call it quiet, is, so there's no movement. But then when I make the second sound, which is the voiced version, or sometimes I'll call it the noisy or loud version, my vocal cords turn on and I can hear it. So you go, and it's actually in the same place in my mouth. F and V are another version of this. So my mouth is in the same position and I'm just turning my voice on. So often children will have a difficult time distinguishing between these sounds because they're coming from the same place in their mouth.
And if you do put your hand to your throat, you can feel the vibrations of your vocal cords. So for our more sensory-oriented children, feeling that vibration really helps them to differentiate between voiced and unvoiced sounds. We'll try a couple more.
S-H, sheep.
And last one.
C-K, duck.
Well done, Natalie. Great job.
Thank you.
So when working on the code packs, I would typically put aside some of the graphemes and phonemes that Natalie had difficulty with, but she mastered them all. So great job.
So once your child or student becomes proficient, you don't need to review all the sounds. The reviewing is for sounds and graphemes that you are still working on and that they need to master. And remember, the mastery is within 2 seconds. So if they're not acknowledging these sounds automatically, then you're going to keep working on it. It may seem like it's a little bit of drill and kill. Is sometimes what we call these strategies. And in education, we've sort of moved away from a lot of these drill type methods. But for children with dyslexia and those that are struggling with reading, it is important that they master it. And the only way to do that is with explicit direct instruction. So they need to be reviewing this over and over and over again. And this is not hours of drilling. This is an activity that you'll do for maybe 5 minutes. And that's it. You're going through a few cards. You're making sure, I might check in to make sure that they remember what the short sound for I is. I know they know it, but I might just do it once in a while. And then I'm introducing maybe a new sound and reviewing some old sounds. So this is not a process that's taking hours upon hours, even 20 minutes. This is a 5-minute process that you can do before you start reading with your child, when you wake up in the morning in a classroom. You can do it at the beginning of your literacy lesson really quickly as a whole group. You can work with students in small groups and then even further individually.
Okay, so the next step that we're going to talk about is the importance of printing. Printing is a very multisensory skill, and it is one that we always ensure that we include in our structured literacy programs. We're going to give you a little poster to take a look at right now to try and illustrate how some children might find it difficult to differentiate one letter from another. So if we take a look at this symbol or object here, we can clearly see it's a chair. If we turn it around and change the orientation, it's still a chair. Now if I flip it upside down, it's still a chair. And if I have flipped it upside down and I change the orientation, it's still a chair. So a lot of our students with reading disabilities and reading difficulties do have a difficult time differentiating between these letters here: B, D, P, and Q, and sometimes as well the number 9. So this is to illustrate how when we're looking at certain objects, the object doesn't change. However, when we look at a line with a circle on it, it drastically changes what the letter sound is. For example, as we can see, this is the letter B. When we draw the letter B, we start at the top of the letter and we start by going downwards. And then we come halfway up and we draw the ball. So when we're working with a multi-sensory approach, we want to ensure that the child is actually printing the letter correctly. So I would say this is the letter B. It makes the sound B. And we would trace the letter and print it and say the sound B.
And this is a critical part because each letter is actually written differently. And so we need to make sure that our children that are struggling with reading or that have dyslexia know that there's a different way to write each letter.
So if we turn our letter B around, we clearly see this is the letter D, Because B and D are very different letters, we want to illustrate that to our students or our children by showing that they are printed differently. So unlike the letter B, which I just modeled, the letter D, we actually start in the middle of the letter and we draw what I call the magic C first. So we start here and we draw the letter C, and without taking our pencil or finger off the paper, we go straight up and down. So we teach children to differentiate the letters by drawing them and by printing them differently. I'm going to do that again. We put our finger on the middle of the D, we draw the magic C, and we go up and down. And we say the letter sound as we do it. D. D. One thing that is incredibly important about printing, I'll do the letters P and Q as well. One thing that is very important about printing and that is really important to note for your child is that when we print letters, the motion is in the same direction as when we read. So I'm going to go back to the letter B again. When I draw the letter B, I always start on the left-hand side. When we read left to right. And printing, it has the same rule. It follows the same pattern. We move left to right, top to bottom. So using that principle in mind, always remind the child we start at the far left and then we move towards the right and we start at the top. Often children do like to start at the bottom and move their way up. You have to remind them we don't read the bottom of the page and read upwards. We start at the top and we move down. So you would start at the very top and you'd go down, and then you move to the right-hand side of the page the same way you would when you read. Now for the letter D, we clearly don't start at the far left, but we start here and we move slightly left, but we always finish on the right. So when you do the letter C, you're actually starting in the middle of the letter D, and you go around and you end in the same direction that you would from left to right. That orientation is very important and really important to establish that through printing so that when we move to reading, that the same pattern exists in reading.
On that note, so this is for printing. If you're looking to recognize the letter B and D when you are reading books for children, there is a really nifty trick you can do with your hands. B and D. So sometimes with a child that is struggling, I will put an elastic around the B hand, and it's a reminder that this is the letter B. So when they go to read on the page, mirror image. When they go to read on the page, they know that this hand has their elastic, this is their B. So if they're looking at the word with a B and a D in it, they can put their hand against the word and they can see that that's the letter B and this is the letter D. So that's a really nifty trick that they can use when they're reading. When they're writing, the form is what tells them which letter they're writing.
Another great trick that many teachers have probably seen and hopefully use in the classroom is this strategy here. They are laminated strips that we call sky, grass, ground. So our sky, grass, ground strips help students to understand the orientation of some of their letters. And when we draw letters such as the letter B, we start up in the sky. So I'm going to get my dry erase marker. And if I was teaching the letter B and D explicitly, because often the letters B and D are the two letters that are most frequently confused, I would say the letter B would start up in the sky. Also, if you think about most living things, where do most living things like to relax? And that would be in the grass. There are very few animals that are resting down in the ground, but for the most part, when you like to go to the park, when you like to relax, you're sitting on the grass. So all of our letters in some shape or form are sitting on the grass. So when we're doing the letter B, remember we move from left to right. We're going to start in the sky And we're going to move down to the grass. So we go down, 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 and we stop at the bottom of the grass because that's where our letter B is resting. And then we're going to come halfway up. I'm going to try and move my hand here. And we're going to finish our letter. And so our letter is sitting nicely in the grass. And I would do a whole line of the letter B and have the child, as they're drawing the letter, starting in the sky, going down to the grass, saying the sound B, B, B. Very short and sharp B. Now, after your child or your student has done a line, we might move on to its neighboring cousin, the D, that says D. And remembering that we can't start with the line because then we'd be moving right to left. So keeping that principle in mind, we start with the magic C. The letter D is a magic C letter. We start with the magic C and we end the letter on the right-hand side. And as we draw the letter, we say D. And we start in the middle of the grass. We rest down on the bottom of the grass, and then we go up to the sky, and we say the sound D. Now, we have other magic C letters, such as the letter G. And the letter G is a magic C letter because we incorporate the letter C, which rests nicely in the grass, and then it goes up and it touches the top of the letter C, and then it goes deep down into the ground. So that students begin to recognize that letters take up different spaces on the page, because often what we see, especially if printing is not explicitly taught, that the letters of an early writer are often squished together, and they do have a difficulty differentiating between B and D, and often we don't see the tall line on the B and we don't see the lines going deep down into the ground. So the sky grass ground is an excellent way to practice the letters. And again, I'm just going to repeat that we always move in the direction when we're printing from left to right. We have to correctly teach the letter formation for B, D, P, Q, and the number 9. The different kinesthetic motion helps the child to differentiate between the different letters and the sounds they make. And also, you say the letter name, B, you trace it, and you say the sound. B, B, D, D. And you can, for our younger readers or in our younger printers, it's a great idea to use larger font so that they can practice the motion. And then as children get older, they can work on smaller lines and the spacing.
If you're looking for a really good program for handwriting and printing, Handwriting Without Tears is an amazing program, and they follow excellent letter formation strategies and skills, and they have some really great workbooks that you can either download or purchase. Okay, so that is the end of our session today. We covered a lot. We are going to, again, I'm going to remind you that we are going to ask you to, before our question and answer, hopefully you have time to create a quick code pack with the letters of the alphabet, including the vowels and consonants. And that way, if you have any questions, you can ask them of us in our question and answer. In our next session, we are going to touch on how to use your code pack in more depth to start blending and building words and starting to read. We hope to see you soon, and be sure to check your email for the phoneme chart where you will have all of the keywords that you can use for creating your code pack.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.